Hello, this is Dennis.
And this is Jay, and we're from Podcast Stardust.
You're listening to the Rebel Base Card Podcast.
Great pull, kid.
I'm gonna clean you out again.
I don't know, I'm feeling lucky.
Everything's gonna be all right, kid.
You found the Rebel Base Card Podcast.
She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts, kid.
I'm your host, Greg McLaughlin.
Have I made a few bad decisions? Sure.
We talk about cards, collecting Star Wars, and to people in the Star Wars community.
Don't worry, we're gonna meet up with some friends of mine.
Look for special episodes called The Breakfast Pack, talking about your favorite Star Wars shows.
We will never have a better chance than this.
All right, let's get started.
Well, perhaps it is time to begin again.
Welcome back, or if this is your first episode, welcome aboard. My name is Greg McLaughlin, and this is the Rebel Base Card Podcast. Dan Zehr returns to the program to discuss the recent announcement of the Saga Museum of Star Wars Collectibles by Rancho Obi-Wan at their recent fundraising gala. The owners of the largest collection of Star Wars memorabilia aims to merge with some other super collectors and create a dedicated space to house the combined collections, which would operate as a proper museum. It would allow for more fans and visitors as well as offer educational programming. Their goal is to raise $2 million in the next 2 years to achieve this. As collectors and some fans start to grow older, it does beg the question of what is to become of these collections, and should they be in a proper museum? And what about your own collections? Well, you and I might not have a cool name for your Star Wars room or shelf, but what would be your plans for your prized possessions once you've grown past them, or they you? Dan Zehr, as well as you know, is the host of the popular Coffee with Kenobi podcast, which, along with its tie-in social media channels and the CWK Facebook group, has been talking Star Wars and fostering community for over 11 years and has been on the program a number of times. Dan has been out to Rancho Obi-Wan and has interviewed Steve on many occasions. He joins us to talk about the Saga Museum and the legacy of collecting. We'll be right back after this with more.
You can waste time with your friends when your chores are done. Now, come on, get to it.
Hi, this is David Motters.
And I'm Aaron Harris of Star Wars Reaction Podcast.
And you're listening to the Rebel Base Card Podcast.
Great pull, kid. Carabas.
Carabas. Perfect. I like that better. We'll get to our interview with Dan Zehr here in a few minutes, but I did want to get some homestand keeping out of the way because there was a lot of news and things happening recently. I'll start off with the debut of Star Wars Galaxy Chrome by Topps. The set did debut on November 1st, but some people got some early looks by some of the breakers, and from what I have seen, the cards look fantastic, and one of my favorite things about this release is the return of artist attribution on the back of a lot of the base cards. I did manage to snag some Dave Dorman ones. I was very happy to see him back in Galaxy Chrome, and I'll be looking forward to kind of seeing them, and over the course of the next several weeks, I'll be taking a look, talking to some of the other collectors, and probably doing a special show to kind of like break down a review of it. But from what I've seen so far, it's pretty good. The debut prices for the hobby boxes were $199 and even showing up at GameStop of all places. But of course, those prices usually change once the initial runs are sold out, and I would expect to see the prices go up. Now, if you're a casual collector like me, a lot of times you turn to the secondary markets to kind of pick these up, especially if you like to kind of chase autos or sketches, as the boxes will increase in price a little bit. But I've seen some friends of mine grab those boxes and cases early, and I am hoping that I'll be hearing more from them, and that I'll be seeing some of this base hit the market so I can pick up more. I'm kind of excited to build this set and glad it's out. I know that high tech is coming right around the corner as well, and those are more of a plastic type card. They've run those before, but also kind of excited to see what those look like and to kind of get the reviews and kind of feedback from a lot of the collectors out there as well. In addition to Galaxy Chrome, Fantasy Flight Games did launch the Twilight of the Republic expansion set, and I know our pal and Card Squadron winger Gregory Cass did lay his hands on a booster box, so it'll be excited to kind of see what his reaction is going to be. All right, and also we got a brand new Skeleton Crew trailer. It looked really good, and hopefully I'm not going to spoil too much, but I do know that we will be, Greg and I will probably be breaking down the trailer after I get back from vacation at some point before the debut of Skeleton Crew on December 3rd with a 2-part episode. I'm getting a little more excited about it. I don't like I said, I don't want to spoil the trailer for you if you haven't. If you are the type that like to watch the show without seeing the trailer, not to get spoiled, that's awesome. And of course, if you're watching the show, please join Greg and I on breakfast. I think we'll have to call this one Skeletons for Breakfast or something along those lines. You know us, we always try to add a name to it. But that should be fun, and should be a fun December as well. All right, Star Wars Card Trader. We got a brand new base set that just launched. Typically, it's around this time when Star Wars Card Trader kind of launches their new base set with some purple variants. And because it's the 10th anniversary coming up next year, the 10th anniversary base has a lot of that first set feel to it, where it has like those chrome, borders that you saw on the old Kenner, on the old Kenner toys and whatnot, and kind of like the yellow font that kind of is indicative to the opening crawl. But the purple preview variants that I've seen so far, I like the characters in it, and I'm excited to kind of chase those again. I always kind of wish that they always kind of move the base set to a release in January or late December, because usually by the time the year ends, I will have gotten a good chunk of it, but there we go. So it was fun to kind of trade around and see if you could pick up some of those preview ones. I know they kind of do 2 sets of 50 because that is a 100 card set that'll have a number of variants, but always excited to see a brand new set of base, and we've had some really nice art in there. I know Robert Jimenez has had some work in there recently, as well as Azuri art, so that's always nice to see original art. Brandon Bernard and his crew always just do a bang-up job. Congratulations, almost, for 10 years, and hopefully next year we'll be hearing a lot more from Star Wars Card Trader and all the Topps digital apps, and hope to kind of bring you some more coverage of that. All right. Lastly, and I didn't want to bring the vibe down, we did have a passing of an artistic legend, as Greg Hildebrandt passed away a few days ago as I am recording this. Greg and his brother Tim worked on one of the original Star Wars posters, and we had a chance to talk with Greg a few years ago on the podcast. Fabio Fiore, then of Tatooine Times and now I think Blue Screen Reviews, did a joint interview. We talked to Greg about the 25th anniversary of Shadows of the Empire. And Greg couldn't have been a nicer human being, a wonderful artist. Even when we talked to him then at the age of 82, he was still going full blaze on his artwork, doing commissions and whatnot, and really working up until the early part of this year before some health issues finally kind of got to him. So condolences to the family. And I thought, as I kind of went back into the archives, we might do a full remembrance of Greg Hildebrandt later on in the year, as we wanted to kind of maybe let some time pass. But there was a segment that I thought would be nice and appropriate to kind of play, to kind of remember him, and like our thoughts, prayers, and wishes go out to Gene and the family. Gene was very gracious to help Fabio and I organize the interview we had, the time with him, and it was very precious, and I am very fortunate that we had a chance to talk with him. After our interview with Dan Zehr, we'll play a little bit of that before we close out tonight's program. All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Dan Zehr.
Hi, this is Frank Mulder, or Mr. Daft Prawn on Twitter and Instagram, and you are listening to the Rebel Base Card Podcast. Great pull, kid.
We're in attack position now, sir.
Hold here.
We're not going to attack.
I have my orders from the Emperor himself. He has something special planned for him. We only need to keep him from escaping.
Rancho Obi-Wan, which, if you're not familiar with, I'll just summarize by saying, of course, Steve Sansweet, collector number 1 in my book. He has amassed, a Guinness Book of World Records, largest, number of Star Wars collectibles and memorabilia. But I think with him and some of these other super collectors, they're starting to kind of be concerned about not only the upkeep of Rancho Obi-Wan and to take care of this, but to expand what they can do, because Rancho Obi-Wan, which is in Petaluma, California, it's on an old chicken ranch, and you go through and it has this huge collection, but there's only a certain amount of space for a certain amount of people, and you do have to be a member of Rancho Obi-Wan to book your a tour of it, and they usually sell out in advance. They do have fundraising events from time to time. Actually, the one that was on October 5th was actually the first they've had since 2018. They were able to raise there, I think, $49,000, which I think someone matched and made over $96,000. That helps with the upkeep. Some of the podcasts I was listening to, including the guest I'm going to introduce here in a second, have been talking to Steve about the fact that their costs for Rancho Obi-Wan. One of the most startling things was the fact that the fire insurance, because of course, hello California, has gone up from about like $1,000 to over $7,000. And so by putting this together, they are hopefully planning to have a permanent place where they can have this collection stored, but also offer educational programming. And so I started thinking about that, plus our own collections and what happens when we pass. I always hate to say when we die. I said, like, well, when either we outgrow our collections or they outgrow us. I think that is the nicest way I've found to say it. But I wanted to bring in what I consider to be an expert and a friend of the podcast, Dan Zehr from Coffee with Kenobi. I'm so excited, Dan, because it's like I'm getting my own Coffee with Kenobi. I feel so guilty by saying, like, I get him for an hour, folks, but so do you. And so, Dan, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, sir. Well, just your voice is like caffeine for the soul. So it's just an absolute delight to be back on with you.
Dan, one thing I've loved listening, and it's funny, there are probably two aspects that, starting with Coffee with Kenobi, when I first started downloading it in 2015, there were two things I think I remember you talking about over time that I was totally not aware of. I mean, you were kind of my gateway into the larger Star Wars community. One was this thing called Celebration, which I kept hearing you talk about, but I didn't quite know what it was, and until you really go there, you don't really know what it is. But the other was Rancho Obi-Wan and Steve Sansweet, and I think you would agree that when you start to kind of peel back that onion that is Steve Sansweet, I mean, he's more than just an onion, but there are so many layers of what he has done from his time at Lucasfilm to Rancho. Could you just give me sort of like your 411 of what Steve is and what he means to the community?
Well, that's a big, beautiful question, because from the mid 90s, when Star Wars was sort of emerging from its own carbonite of the dark times, right, where there wasn't much going on in Star Wars, it became known sort of through the zeitgeist that Steve Sansweet was a massive, reputable Star Wars collector, the biggest collector of Star Wars memorabilia in the world. He was also the director of fan relations, or I think they call it director of fan relations for Lucasfilm. He was someone who was on the sets for the prequels. He did a lot of stuff with StarWars.com. I think he operated some of the behind-the-scenes camera stuff. He was everywhere. He was the guy that revealed the title of Star Wars Episode 3 by, at San Diego Comic-Con, ripping open his shirt, Clark Kent Superman style, and he had the t-shirt with the logo on it. And as he just said it on the show recently, everyone ran. And security's like, why didn't you tell us you're going to sell these shirts? And he's just been synonymous with Star Wars and fandom. He would go to Star Wars celebrations all the way from the beginning, because he helped, as you know, he and Dan Madsen helped start Star Wars Celebration. So he's been a part of it from the very beginning. He's always been someone who's been so incredibly gracious and kind with fans, taking pictures with them, talking with them, speaking with them. And he's just a very gregarious, kind guy. So when you think of Star Wars and collecting, it has to be him. Not only for the things I mentioned, but as you stated at the top of this, he holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the world's largest collection of Star Wars merchandise and memorabilia. And he, all the way back in the day when he worked for the Wall Street Journal, he was been a collector. He famously found, like, in the back of a dumpster, like some of the original models for the Death Star, and just he's got everything. I've been fortunate to be at Rancho Obi-Wan 3 or 4 times. I'm pretty sure it's 4 times. I know for a fact it's at least 3, but it's probably 4. In Petaluma, California, I did several of the Rancho Obi-Wan galas when they were actually at Rancho Obi-Wan. And I have so many great memories and stories from that place. But the top of that list is just seeing him smile and go up and talk to people because he gets to share his love and his passion. Like we get to do in our podcast and with our friends and family, gets to share their passions about Star Wars itself.
One thing I liked in listening to your show and some of the other podcasts talk about when tours come out there, they purposely shorten the number of people because they want their dozens to be able to address a group. And you know as well as I have, if you go on vacation, you take a group, size matters, for lack of a better word. And so, especially with the stories that each of these have, and I think that, I think the one thing when you think about a piece of memorabilia that you have or something, another member of your family could go in there and look and say, that's just a thing. And you go, no, that's this. I mean, I know
it's a memory.
It's a memory. Yeah. And even, refinding some of my old Kenner, I go, I could put this back together and I would enjoy it. But there is something about the fact that when the stuff that has made it all this way, I mean, there's the stuff we've had and collected and we enjoy it. But there is that going, wow, I can't believe, 30, 40 years later, that thing has made it to today. But, Rancho just has that on a massive scale. Can you even describe, Dan, your first trip to Rancho Obi-Wan and what you have? I noticed, is there a thing where they kind of do a door reveal, or how do they present it to you if you remember and you go out there and you're able to get a tour?
Oh, yeah, I remember it. I actually remember it beautifully. I even have a video of the first time that I walked in and saw the collection for the first time, and it kind of gives me chills to think about, but our old friend Marcus Doring, who passed away, about a little over a year ago, I believe, he took the video of me walking in there. You walk down this hallway, this very small hallway, you walk up these steps, walk down this hallway, and you see the slide. There's literally a light at the end of the tunnel. And you go down these steps and you just see this massive, massive collection that I believe it's either Target or Walmart gave to him. It's got all the original 96 Kenner figures in this big plastic tube, it carded in there perfectly, and then the base of it is surrounded by a couple hundred of the Kenner Stormtroopers lined up perfectly, and you can just walk around and see it. You can see all the Kenner stuff over here, Power of the Force stuff. There's this massive screen-used Darth Vader armor. It really just takes your breath away. I even watched that video recently just because the look on my face was, it was just like, this is how I think I could describe it, Greg. Imagine being a little kid and walking into Santa's workshop and it's just like everything wonderful you could ever possibly imagine. So much joy, so much nostalgia, so much fun, and so much excitement. It's all there. It really is just, it's like a Xanadu. It really is.
What are some of the notable pieces that really spoke to you? I mean, obviously, some things we like to go, I can't believe they either have this or a complete set, but what maybe is one or two things that maybe stopped you in your tracks and you went, oh my gosh, or, that maybe wouldn't speak something to somebody else, but to you, you're like, this is amazing.
Sure. Well, like, as I said, what does speak to everybody is that action figure thing I spent like 20 minutes looking at, but I think that's why it's there at the center, right? But it was the little things, like there's just different sections, and he rotates. He and Ann Newman change things around all the time. But there's this one, there's all these massive shelves that go up and down, a couple of rows of things. But he's got like all of the micro, that's not the micro machines.
The Kenner Micro Collection?
The Kenner Micro Collection, he's got them all there. He's got this huge display of the Power of the Force stuff. Along the walls, you're heading back, if you have to use the restroom, he's got all the Kenner and Power of the Force figures again, but they're all opened up. And then these big plastic cases, and you can just stare and look at them. There is a section of all of the Star Wars cabinet arcade games and all the Star Wars pinball games. And it was always one of my goals to play that original Star Wars arcade game and blow up the Death Star in Rancho Obi-Wan. And I did it, and I was like, it's like winning $1 million. There's this huge table display like at the end of A New Hope, and above it is this massive screen, and he's always got a Star Wars movie playing. And I feel like every time I go there, he's playing The Empire Strikes Back, which is really, really cool. There's he's got a bunch of fan-made stuff of Steve and different things. But I guess, I mean, you could go on, and you'll know what it's like when you go there. You'll feel the same way. But I love the library. The library is just an absolute stunner. It's off. If you go straight, you go into the main warehouse area. But to the very left, before you go down those steps to go into the museum proper, there's this massive library. And in the old intros to CWK Live, you could see a couple of quick snippets of me walking in the library. But it's got like, of course, is it every Star Wars book ever? Probably not. But there's a lot of them. And the way they're organized, and he's got this huge row, which you would appreciate, binders and binders and binders full of the Topps Star Wars stuff. And a guy you may have known, Pablo Hidalgo, pulled one of them out. He's like, "Hey, Dan, and so let's look at these." And he's like going through and he's telling me about all this stuff. And that was just a cool thing. And that's one of the great things about going to these galas, by the way, is there's Steve, there's Matt Martin, there's Pablo, there's Leland, there's at that time Andy Gutierrez, there's all these people. And actually, that was the first time I spent a lot of time with Dave Filoni, because he was just sitting there and talking about that. But that's no different than a Star Wars celebration, really, because it's those moments and those memories where you get to interact with people and kind of rub elbows with people you've admired online, or who are these creatives that have just created some of these most wonderful stories or brought Star Wars to life for us. And I realized that I'm committing one of the worst things you can do as a podcast guest. I answer your question and take it 58 different directions. And, even a traffic controller doesn't know. Where did Dan go with that one?
No, Dan, that's fine, because, it makes my job a little easier. But, trying to describe that, like I said, there's two things. I think it's trying to describe someone what celebration is like. And I think trying to also describe Rancho to someone who hasn't seen it. And, what's amazing is that there would be things there, it's like bringing people into, like, you go to our shelves, or, your family comes in and you go, all right, don't touch that. But it sounds like, I think it'd be very hard not to kind of like hold everything or want it, but it is nice that at least with the arcade games that you're able to, there is some interaction, right? It's not, they didn't set out to make a museum. They were just like, these were warehouses that they just had to store stuff. But on the one hand, when you're bringing some out, I think at some point you probably have to have something that is like, okay, let them play with this. It's fine. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's a line there that they have to go, look, it still has to be enjoyed.
Well, that's why it's a tour and not a free-for-all. And I do think there is an age requirement too, because for little kids, it's just not fair. It's like being in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and you can't even have a gummy bear because you don't touch anything. And why would you? It's a museum. It's a respect for the collections, a respect for what Steve has cultivated. And, of course, it's just like all part and parcel of that. So there is that element, and you just soak it in. It's almost like looking at something online or in those great classic old catalogs, but it's just right there in front of your face. I mean, there's a bunch of guitars with Star Wars things. There's a lot of screen use helmets, and then there's got all the Master Replica stuff and all the General Giant stuff and Sideshow, and he's got the rocket, one of the few actually live in existence rocket firing Boba Fett's. You remember the Fisher-Price Action Heroes, that old collection? You'd probably recognize if you saw it, but he's got Star Wars versions of that that are really, really fun too. And he's got, you remember the Jumbo Gentle Giant? It's like 1/6 scale of the 3 3/4 inch action figures of the Kenner line. He's got all of them lined up on top. Wow. Just perfectly displayed. I talked to some of the people who work at Rancho Obi-Wan and volunteer, and the amount of time it takes to dust everything in there, oh my goodness. Like I in this studio, when I take everything down and dust it, it takes a long time. There though, it is just like a whole other level.
I think they even said they only do it like once a year, and I think alone, you think about the IKEA glass cases that if you go online, you'll see. I think we are the only reasons that IKEA still stocks those glass cabinets, because everybody I know has one except me, I think. But yeah, it's like you have to have. I same thing with my Legos. I have to have them in cases, otherwise, the dust just piles up on them, and I'm looking up and seeing things on my shelf, going, okay, I know it's about time to go through and do it again.
Yes.
But yeah, and so when they kind of made the rounds before the gala, and they alluded to the fact that there was going to be an announcement making, did you kind of see this coming, and or what was your reactions to the announcement of the Saga Museum?
I think there's a lot of emotions. I think it's really exciting because it gets to grow, and you get to add even more into. Imagine there's more that can be added to the collection, because you've got 3 other collectors of legitimate repute as well. But Steve's always the heart and soul of it to me, and I think to so many of us. And the fact that it's going to be that much larger, and on an even bigger scale, it makes me happy because it makes Steve happy. And Steve has made no bones about the fact that it's not going to last forever. He's not going to last forever, but he wants the collection to live on, and live on in a way that Star Wars fans can enjoy and appreciate. That the collection will be taken care of and watched over. It's shepherded over, if you will. So it made me happy. It's a little bittersweet, to be honest, because one of the nice things about Rancho Obi-Wan is there's like an intimacy about it. There's a very small. It's not small, but it's just the way that it's sized and spaced out. You could spend 8 or 9 hours in there and not see it all and just enjoy it. But then they're going to multiply it by be 4 times or 3 times as big because of the 4 collections. Does that math even work out?
You're an English teacher, not a math
That's right.
teacher.
I can diagram that sentence for you if you'd like. If you'd like to have half your audience to fall asleep, but it's I guess it's more sweet than it is bitter, but it's hard not to. It's sort of like at Disney World when they're going to change something. You're first like, oh gosh, I really like it this way, but then they do it and it's fine. It's fine. The memories don't go away. And it gets to preserve this legacy, and it gives the creators and the collectors the peace of mind of combining. It's like a Voltron, right? You combine the cool little individual things in one giant thing of awesome. What could be better?
I did not see that Voltron reference coming, but I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Something else, and it's kind of funny because, in traveling, right? Let's in Chicago we have the Chicago Art Institute. You have the in New York you have all these the Louvre in Paris. You have all these incredible museums that have these amazing artifacts, right? That date back a couple thousand years. Let's just say anyone's museum has Egyptian this, Roman that, medieval this, different pieces. And it is kind of funny to think that Star Wars would warrant a museum like that. And, on the one hand, I think it may be, on the one hand, you're going, anything that justifies what I just bought yesterday at Target, I'm down for. But it's funny to think that we have come to the point, in listening to Steve talk about the fact that, there's that classic shot of Lucas surrounded by all the props, and I think afterwards because they hadn't done that before, and they're like, we should probably really have an archive, so back then they weren't thinking of that, and then all of a sudden, I don't think Steve started out thinking he was going to build a collection to do a museum, but now you get to the point where this stuff is large enough and this stuff is rare enough, especially with some of the other contributors that have, the props or, the wall to wall. I looked at one, the guy that had all the breakfast cereals, and I'm like, that's amazing.
Yes.
and also, why haven't I ever named my collection as cool as this? What the Smithsonian, or
Yeah, it's just the Smithsonian. I've never even heard that. I'm like, well, that's brilliant.
Boba Cabana, and I'm like,
Yeah,
wow,
that's great.
I'm the ex-marketing guy. Why didn't I think of a name for my shelf? I was trying to think of like, I don't know, Zehr's Palace or something like that. But I'm like, but
Zehr's.
I'm workshopping that one.
Yeah, workshop it.
Workshop that one a little more. But I had a funnier one earlier today. But it's funny to think that Star Wars. I mean, they had it at the Museum of Pop Culture. I think they call it Mopop in Seattle. And I've seen the San Diego version of that. I didn't get a chance to go in it, but I was on kind of that campus in Balboa Park. But you're starting to see these pop culture museums come up, but this would kind of be the Pop Culturist of Pop Culture Museum. And it's amazing to think that, wow, we get it. It's important enough to have a museum now.
To me, this makes as much sense as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, because they're all integral, crucial, critical, dare I say, parts of our sociology, of our culture, of our mythology, of the lore of what we care about as people. And Star Wars is at the forefront of that, for almost 50 years now. It would be crazy to me if there wasn't a Rancho Obi-Wan. I mean, because how could you not have a place? I mean, anywhere you go, any convention that you go, or if you go to a museum and they happen to have some pop culture on display, people gravitate towards that Star Wars section, like moths to a flame, right? And it just seems like it's a need. It's not even niche. It's a need. You need to represent what we care about and what we value as people, especially, I think, the authenticity that is Steve Sansweet brings that to the forefront because of how much he loves Star Wars. And he is as big a fan as ever was or ever will be. And the fact that we talked a lot about this. He was on for my 100th show and I thought I struck gold. And boy, did I ever, because we ended up becoming friends. We had a running joke for years. I don't know if you remember this, for Corey and I, we used to say that we sent him over. He would say, "Why didn't you send over a coffee truck to my house?" So we actually sent him a Starbucks gift card, and he and some of the people from Rancho went out and had Starbucks in our on our behalf. And we thought that was so cool, right? And we used to joke about it, and then it became like, all right, don't send me any more coffee. It was just all in fun. But so anyway, to answer your question, I don't think I do this on any other show. You just get me excited and get me going with it. That twinkle in your eyes gets me going, Greg. And it's just great. It needs to be a museum. It belongs in a museum because it's important.
I love what you kind of said, because also I think, when we go to a museum, we're seeing maybe an object or a painting that is hundreds of years old, or an object, from antiquity, but it is something else when you see something from your generation or from, the era that you lived in, that's held up in a regard, that's on display, that has, a sensor. If you touched it, people would come and escort you away. It almost, I think,
yes,
it gives you
possibly prison time,
depending upon, how many fingers you got on it before they caught you. But I think it does sort of, it feels like, I think it gives you a sense of worth going, this was important. I think one of my favorite things from the Rock and Roll Hall Museum was one of the awnings for CBGB's. The club in New York, which, famously the Talking Heads, Blondie, Television, all these bands and you're going, something that would have normally been discarded, but you go, that's an important piece. That's where, some bands got their start, and it was, the Ramones played there, and that kind of like some of the birth of New York punk, just because I know that will make Ross Halban happy. So I'm just going to throw that in there. That was just the first thing, but to see these things. And I think when you're talking about the rocket fired Boba Fett, which is something that we've heard of, or if
talk about a mythical concept, my goodness.
Or, I kind of look behind you, because it looks like you kind of have the early bird Kenner. So at least that's what it looks to me like, where they sent, kids here's a cardboard IOU. or some of these things, and you go, wow. And I felt a little bit of that at Celebration Anaheim. Frank Mulder and I, we got a chance to go through their display, together on that one.
Yeah.
And you just kind of go around, and then I think I went around again, and you're just like, yeah, these things, and you're like, oh, that's right. And to see and see the cards there, I lost my mind when you go like, yeah, that's not just something that came in a box that I have droned on and on for several episodes, but is something like, yeah, this is kind of important, or there's this or that. But it's like, yeah, to see that and to go, yeah, that's that stuff. That's important too.
Extremely. It's all in it's presented at a very, very high level. You don't feel like, I think, hopefully this makes sense. You don't feel like you're in somebody's basement and they've just got a display. Like, this is it's not museum quality. It is a museum. So the quality is inherent in the name because it's a museum. You wouldn't say the Louvre is museum quality. It seems a bit like an oxymoron or something a little repetitive. It is a museum, and it houses the most wonderful things from your Star Wars memory, not only from the original stuff, back in 1978 when they first started releasing these Kenner figures, because in 77 they weren't ready yet, to all the way to stuff from the Disney Plus stuff, and everything in the sequel trilogy. He's got a massive BB-8 collection. He's got this one little area that they had at Celebration. I think in Chicago is when it first debuted. You probably remember this better than me, but it's like it replicated a bedroom in the late 70s.
Oh, that's
and
right.
That's set up still, or at least last time I was there, at Rancho Obi-Wan too.
Yeah, and I remember seeing the catalogs that would have that stuff in it, and every now and then when someone posts, from either like the JCPenney or Sears catalog, and you see that, and you just kind of marvel over the prices, going, it might have been $200.
Come on, DeLorean, yeah.
I know, and you're just like, oh, but also it invokes such, it's just such a great memory. I think even when you see pictures of kids walking out of Toys R Us or something after the Phantom Menace, and they've got 6 Darth Mauls, and in their heads you kind of go, nah, it's not going to be worth anything, but still, I think I think if someone still had those 6 Darth Mauls, I know somebody does. I know somebody has to have those, but I think that would still, even after 25 years, it would still be, I don't think I can break these 6 up. I should only keep one, but I'm like, but there would just be a memory of like, we went there and the buzz and the excitement, and everybody was like, yeah, man, this is so cool. And the movie's great and had all these tie-ins. I mean, there's a reason Greg Cass has that big R2-D2, soda dispenser thing.
I have that too. Yeah. Yeah.
And thanks to Kyle for getting me the Denny's menus from Solo: A Star Wars Story. And I'm like, you can take those out of my cold dead hands.
I got that too. That's great. We got that. I got that in California. Denny's flew us out there.
That's right.
And we sat on the stage of the oh my gosh, the movie theater. What is the main movie theater? They do a lot of their premieres.
Was it Grumman's Chinese Theater?
No, it was across the street.
Oh.
Oh gosh, I can't think of the name now. But yeah, we got to sit on the stage and we ate the stuff, all the Denny's stuff, and they gave us all menus to keep. And I was like, wow. And recently my wife's like, is that a Denny's menu? I'm like, yeah, it's Star Wars. She just, at that point, as you know, as well as me, well, then you just stop asking, because you know what you got into when you marry these guys, these goofballs.
We're the best with a straight face, the straight face answer going, why do you have this? And you just go, because I have to have it. That's why.
I mean, are you kidding? Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't I have it? That's probably the better question.
Oh my gosh. So, they have a daunting road ahead of them. They have to raise, a couple million, and you start to think about the logistics, and in talking to Ann Newman and Steve, it's something you think that, I mean, they have a great army of volunteers, but there really isn't too much to that staff. they have to rely on that. And, you start thinking about, like, if you were going, Dan, if you were going to build a museum, in Washington, Illinois, or Metamora, whichever you prefer, how would you even begin? And that's where I think that the task is daunting for him.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't, because that is just so staggering, and I don't have the talent or wherewithal that they all do. But they're talking, it sounds like, in the San Francisco area, which I hope, because that's really that's really really close to where Petaluma is, right? But who knows what'll happen? But I can't even begin to imagine. I mean, the fact that they could use it for educational purposes, of course, that makes my heart sing because I'm an educator. So I can't even imagine. But because it's Star Wars, and there's so many people that want to see this collection, and all the collections live on and flourish and get even more people a chance to really bask in it and enjoy it. I mean, anything we can do to help them, of course, we're all going to do.
And so something that kind of led into, as they talk about where they would like these collections to go, and the care and feeding going forward, like even talking like, there's a lot of restoration things that they can't really do because they just don't have the funds and the facilities to be able to keep some of these things, because, good old plastic will hang around for a long time, but you have to store posters in a certain way. And then whenever he starts talking about fire insurance, I get a little scared, because one good fire could wipe out an amazing trove of history there. But I start thinking about what happens to the stuff that we have. I mean, you and I are not building a museum. We can workshop a great name to call it, and maybe that'll be our challenge going forward. But when you take a look at, a lot of times you're fortunate enough that you get pre-release stuff, or someone sends you an item to review or whatnot, and you get it. And at the beginning it was great, and then it didn't take very long for you to go, this is a problem. Not only for storage of what I have, but then what happens to it. I don't know if you've thought too much about it. I mean, what's nice with Mason is that's a perfect age to enjoy and do that kind of stuff together with family. But have you thought about, gosh, how long will I continue to do this, and what happens to these items, and what could this mean to other family members that are not me, who didn't go through this, who didn't experience some of this, and who it may not have any kind of connection.
Well, that is a thing, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just really just stuff. You can't take it with you when you pass, but you like to think that it goes somewhere where it's equally loved, or that it is equally cared for, or thought of as, something that is special, something that is important to someone. I mean, Mason knows that all this stuff will eventually be his. I made it legal and everything. Because,
I think that's how that works. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But I do think about it a lot, Craig. I've thought about it a lot. And space is as big of a reason as anything. During COVID, we all had time, a lot of time to be at home and to really kind of take stock of what's important, of what matters, of where we are. And for my wife, Deanna, and I, we really took a long look at everything that we had, and we just kind of went through what is the stuff that is just so important and so special that it has to be a part of our legacy, and what is the stuff that we can part with. So I've done a dozen. No, that's hyperbolic, but I've done probably 4 or 5 really good passes through my entire collection. I've said several times on the show, I've got this massive attic in our house, and it's full of Star Wars stuff. And I've gone through the whole thing 4 or 5 times. I've sold things on eBay. I have Brian's Toys is a great website. They have an app where you can scan your figures, and they will tell you right away, like on the app, what the price is. And then you can ship to them, and they give you a UPS discount, and you can ship to them, and they buy it, and they just send you, they look everything over, it's in good shape, and they'll send you a check. I've done that a bunch of times. I've got here in the studio, I've got tons of stuff everywhere. There's just you can only see a really small part of it in the camera right now. But then I've got a little storage area in the basement where I've got a bunch of stuff. And then I've got stuff in the attic. And what I do now, because I've narrowed it down to the stuff that are just like super important to me because of nostalgia or whatever, where I rotate stuff in and out all the time.
Nice.
I have a certain display of Christmas. So it was like my own little museum, I guess. And that's where it is. But my new philosophy of collecting, since I've gone through all these things, is I realize that I hope this doesn't sound maudlin, but it's just a fact. Someday I'm going to die. We're all going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to have everybody, go through my collection and figure out what's valuable. I've already done that. So now they don't have to do that. And I want to know that whatever sticks around is the stuff that was the utmost important to me. So that's the stuff that I've kept. My new rule is if I can't display it right away, if I don't want to display it right away, then why do I have it? What is the point of me having it anymore? So that's the stuff I give. I mean, of all the things that I get, and I'm extremely blessed and fortunate that companies care what some goofball teacher from Central Illinois thinks about anything, which is sort of a miracle in and of itself. I'd say 85% of it I give away. I give it to Tom for Steam into Star Wars.
Right.
I give them away as prizes. I give them away to local collectors in the area. I give them the kids, just different things like that, because at the end of all of this, if I'm not going to immediately enjoy it, then, or someone else can't enjoy it, then there's no point for me to keep it in a bin covered in dust. And that is not something that I say lightly. It took me a good 40 plus years to get to that point. I mean, truly it did.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I don't know, COVID just kind of did it for me in a very good way, in a very positive way that I am very happy about. I just took restock, and now for me, it's really about legacy lightsabers, but I'm not, and it's almost like this has become an intervention. So thank you, Greg, for helping me. I'm not someone that is a completist anymore. You're not going to see me being a completist about anything because I don't have the room. The money, it gets expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other things I want to do besides buy Star Wars things. So I just keep the stuff that's the ultimate. So like, to me, it's all about retro Kenner action figures, the really cool lightsabers. It's more about quality, not quantity. If that kind of makes sense. Enjoy editing all this babbling.
Oh no, this is perfect. Well, it's funny because the laptop is actually being propped up by a box that's full of that I would say about 95% Celebration Anaheim swag.
Yeah.
And I took it out the other day. It sits next to it was one of those things I set it next to my nightstand, and I'm like, all right, I've got to eventually, filter out. All right, stickers go here, this goes here. But it's fun to you take it out, but it's in and of itself that they're just random pieces, but as a collection themselves, they go, wow, that is what I acquired over the days of, and it almost means more as a group, as just that thing, because you can take it out, and I have to, you really have to get it back in a certain way, otherwise it doesn't really fit because the flat pieces and all this.
Absolutely.
But it has such great memories. But as if you take them out, like I do have other collections of patches and all this kind of stuff. But it's like you're right. It's like without the means to display it, and I think that's when it kind of comes like I just don't want to put it's hard to put anything in a box and put it away. And
unless you're going to rotate it in and out, and that was the only way that I felt okay with storing stuff at this point in my life. I just thought, well, if I'm going to get back to it, great. But when I look at it and I didn't even know I had it, and it doesn't even give me a thrill, then why do I need it?
Exactly. Let me ask you this: when it comes down to it, right? When you kind of get ready for those hard passes, right? Like you've taken some of the cursory ones and you've gone through, and it is cathartic to go through. But what are a couple, three of the items that you go, this will be the very last. This will be something that you can do what you want, but I'm taking this to near the end, not the casket. Maybe
depends.
There's a card or two that just may come with me.
Yes,
but there's a couple things where I would go, no, I can let it. I could let all this other stuff go, or I will have to at some point. But what are a couple of the things you go? You know what? In this little room you're going to give me somewhere, hovel up when I'm 70 or 80. I want these 2 or 3 things.
Oh yeah, that's an easy one. Like there are some things, because I do, and Deanna's so good at organizing. She gives me great ideas all the time. But when I initially went through it, I had a yes pile, I had a maybe pile, and I had a no pile. Right. And then over time, the maybe pile became a separate entity where every time I'd go back and I look at the maybe pile again, like, okay, it's been a year. Subconscious has been working on it. Does this switch over to the no, or does it switch over to a yes? You know what I mean? So you learn to kind of go through stuff, but there are some things that I will never part with. And I think the number one thing that pops to my list is my 12 Star Wars Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi Burger King glasses.
Ah, yeah.
I have a very prominent place up here. Let me see if I can, where you can kind of.
Oh my.
Yeah. You just got them right there. And I just love them. I just will never part with them. I have so many great memories of buying them and waiting in line at Burger King to get them. And so that's it. Like that's a big memory for me. And the other thing is I've got all the original Kenner action figures. There's even a couple missing. This is kind of silly, but maybe it's not. Maybe you'll understand this. I'm maybe missing 6 from the original 90.
Wow.
96 line. And I've seen them out a couple of times, and the price tags are, of course, astronomical. But I don't buy them. Even if I had the money and I was willing to spend X amount of dollars on a collectible, I don't buy them because I think what I like about them is that I had them when I was a kid, and I think they're beautiful, and I have so many great memories with them. The other ones I get now, it's not the same thing for me. So it's almost like there's this word that I encourage everyone to consider. It's called being content. Being content with what you have and embracing what you have. So with that being said, again, the Burger King, the original Kenner action figures. And then if I had to pick a third one, it would be my Kenner Death Star. I love that thing so much. I see it every day. I'm looking at it right now. It was so special. I remember getting it at Christmas time. I've still got every little piece. I've even got the original little felt trash.
Wow.
The sponge, but I've got them in Ziploc because I know if you open them up, it'll just turn into ash. And then I've got the little grappling hook that Luke uses to swing over I've got that. That's usually one of the things that is hard to find. And I've got a couple of extra like Obi-Wans and Stormtrooper stuff that I've got set up. So those will be the 3 things that I would keep. And they're all pretty much based on the original Star Wars, the original 1977 film. And that really is, if pressed, if you were to say to me, you can only keep one thing, Star Wars, what's A New Hope? If I only had A New Hope and that was it, that would be fine. Everything else is gravy. So that's the 3 I keep.
Yeah, it's a couple years ago I got the trash compactor portion of the Kenner Death Star, and it I did line it, but it's on my desk at work, and it has, I have 2 compartments. I have, pens and pencils in one, and then another side of it I that's where my battery storage is,
oh, cool.
I have said zero things about it, so I'm like, I think someone probably realizes it's a toy, but I have not alluded to it all. And next to it is a portion of the cantina that I use that has different things to make it look like it's a desktop organizer. But if someone looked hard enough, they could probably see R5D4 and the Power Droid sitting behind a thing that would hold paper clips and things like that. So they're kind of tucked away back there.
That's cool. See, there's a practicality to that. I this is crazy, but I had during COVID, I found I have 15 old Star Wars toothbrushes. I just had them, and I'm like, what the heck? And some of them are kid size, but I took them into the bathroom, and every time I saw for a new toothbrush, I just open them up and use them. I never did that years ago, but when I use it, I want to live in it. I would much rather brush my teeth with it for a couple of months or until it's time to get a new one, than have it sitting in the attic and me forget I even had it. Because even though it's silly, it's fun for me, and I think Star Wars fans can relate to that.
I love that. And I think that's a more positive way to kind of bring this to a close rather than talk about, what happens when our family comes in and tosses our collection away or sells it off or when it's taken from us.
That's easy. You come back and you haunt them. I mean, that's the only option.
The Rebel Base Card Podcast does not endorse ghost haunting your
That's
family.
Right. Even as a Force ghost, kids.
Not even once. But I am kind of curious. We just to kind of round things out for this evening. Are you there on day one? Are you at the Saga Museum day one? And what would you let's say it's been announced? What would Coffee with Kenobi do at the Saga Museum when it announced? Let's just say they're funding and they're ready to go. How are you going to cover this?
Oh my gosh, I would be there day one if at all humanly possible, and I would certainly move mountains to try to make that happen. I would just. I think one of the most important things, any of the great things I've been blessed to cover, the first thing I always do is I experience it. Then I go back and then I do the pictures and then I do the audio and all that kind of stuff. But first, and you and I did this when we went to Chicago for the Disney 100 exhibit, you just want to enjoy it and remember that you're a fan, because it's super easy when you cover stuff, as long as we have, to make this your job. And to forget why you did it in the first place, because you get caught up in content and creation and you want to share it with everybody because you want them to feel like they're a part of it. But before they can do that by proxy, you have to tap into why you love it in the first place. And that's what I would do. And I would give Steve the biggest hug, and I just know he'd have this massive smile on his face. And I would say thank you again for bringing Star Wars to so many people and sharing this love. He's a storyteller. Steve's a storyteller, like the great creators and fable makers of ancient pasts, of the orators that bring these stories to life. Steve has done that through all the great things, merchandise that Star Wars has created, cultivated a love, showed us it's okay to love and to collect and to bring this stuff into our homes, because you can't necessarily bring the movie into your house. At least that's what it felt like in 1977, because, no streaming. There wasn't like a VHS quite then. Once it actually came to that, you had the only way to bring it into your house was through Star Wars. And so you want to bring that energy into the museum. And I hope I get the chance to do it. I hope I get a chance to do it with you, Greg.
Oh, wouldn't that be a day? That would be a day.
That would be great. That'd be great.
And I love that lesson too, as we kind of bring things to a close. And one of the most important lessons I think I've learned in being around you and from you is being in the moment, whether you're in a conversation, whether you're doing a podcast, whether you're with friends, that there is always that maybe that one eye towards what's going to happen next, but being in the moment is so crucial to enjoying the moment and actually allowing yourself to enjoy the moment.
Yes.
Dan, I always feel strange when we close with this, but for those who have not had a chance to check out Coffee with Kenobi and everything you do, which is a lot for this community, but can you just let us know where they can find you and interact with you online?
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for your generosity of spirit and allowing me the time to talk with you. It's always a thrill to get that message to come on the Rebel Base Card, and I'm just very delighted to be a part of it. As far as finding me, you can find me on coffeewithkenobi.com. That's where the website is. That's where the links are to all the social media. And that's where you get all the advertisements to join the CWK Alliance and help support this community in different ways, support the St. Jude Children's Hospital through the show. We have the podcast every single week. And while I don't do the live show weekly anymore, there's hundreds of videos of past shows where we teach Orabesh. We go through a lot of the great shows on Disney Plus, and just have a great time talking about and fostering a love of Star Wars, much like you do on the Rebel Base Card.
I appreciate it. Once again, thank you for coming on, and I look forward to always hearing and seeing the good things that you're doing out there, and just keep somehow for over 11 years, this train just keeps going, and I wish you all the best and good luck in keeping that going. I'm going to make you work until I'm tired of listening to it, which won't be for many, many years to come.
Okay, well that makes so you're the one. Thank you so much. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Dan.
Can I offer you a libation to celebrate the closing of our shared narrative?
Once again, I want to thank my guest, Dan Zehr, for being on the program. It was a pleasure to get a chance to talk with him. I know he's super busy. Just had that encyclopedia go up for pre-orders on Amazon, and I'll try to throw that link into the show notes so you can kind of take a look at that if that's something you want to purchase as well. Looks exciting. Speaking of exciting, there are lots of good things that are coming up on the show as well. I have a stack of audio files that need to be turned into podcast episodes for you. I won't give everything away, but boy, is it going to be fun. I enjoyed a lot of these discussions, and I can't wait to bring this to you. So as I dug back into the archives and I listened again to the story of how Greg and Tim Hildebrandt got the gig for one of the original Star Wars posters, I just couldn't help but smile, because it reminded me of just how nice and gracious Greg was with his time, but how just, when just thinking about it, those times as far as where they were in their career and where Star Wars was as it was getting ready to be released, and how they got this poster done in record time. And also how it ties into Young Frankenstein, and thinking about the recent passing of Terry Garr, it was oddly coincidental, or just there was a weird connection there. But I thought it'd be nice to play this for you. Once again, I think we will do a full episode on the remembrance of Greg Hildebrandt, and I might see if I can bring Fabio back to talk about what happened, and maybe play more of our interview with that so you can hear that. Of course, you can always go back and go to episode 95 for the full interview with Greg Hildebrandt as we talk to him about Shadows of the Empire. But once again, my thoughts and prayers go out to the family. I hope you enjoy this. This is a way to maybe close out this episode, and we'll talk to you soon.
Tim and I, when people ask, how did you get that poster, that first Star Wars poster, I always say, well, I got to thank Mel Brooks for that. And I never met Mel Brooks, and I don't know him. He doesn't know me. But Tim and I were doing a lot of illustration, just general illustration, making a living back in the 60s and 70s. And getting down to it was getting very monotonous and boring. Like the last thing we were working on was this toilet training book. You'd take any job that came by, just to do it and stay in the business and keep working. I mean, that's general illustration, And then we said, well, let's go after something a little more money or glamorous or some damn thing, movie posters. So we said, oh, yeah, okay. Back in the day, you could open the yellow pages up. And we literally went like this, the way that this bishop I told you I used to work for, he would, when he didn't know something that he wanted to find, he'd cover his eyes up, point to the thing, and that's it. So that's what Tim and I did. And we called this company, and they did movie posters, a small studio in New York, which is a branch of a Hollywood studio. And they said, yeah, well, come on in, bring your portfolio over. We said, well, we do this and this. Oh, yeah, come on. Back in the day, you could call somebody, they'd answer the phone. They'd say, yeah, bring your portfolio over. We went over with a portfolio. This is 1973. Right? And we walked in the door, and there were these paintings sitting all around the place of Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. I says, what the hell is that? And they said, well, Mel Brooks. I said, yeah, I'm a big fan. I've been a fan since, the shows back in the 1950s that he wrote, and, well, he's doing Frankenstein, black and white, blah, 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 blah. I said, we got to do a poster. I have to do a poster. Please, let's do a poster. And they said, this is it. They're being shipped off tomorrow morning to Brooks, and the budget's all gone. I said, I don't care. Tim and I are like, we don't care. Please, please. They said, well, it's up to you. So they gave us a bunch of 8x10s from the film, and Tim and I got on the train going back to New Jersey where we lived, and we're figuring out what the hell should we figured out the set about the monster with the girl with Igor and with the castle and with Matt, young. Blah, blah, blah. We came up with the whole concept. Got home, roughed it all out. Grabbed a couple of people, shot Polaroid shots, painted a picture overnight, literally overnight, stayed up all night long, brought the painting in the next morning. These guys were shaking their heads. What the hell? It didn't get used, but they remembered that 3 years later after we get famous for illustrating the Lord of the Rings now. We illustrate the rings, get a global fan following. They call us, and they said, well, we have a poster, a movie here that the director isn't satisfied with the poster he's got, and we need help. The film's coming out in a week. And we said, okay. So jumped on the train, went to the city. There it was. They had the Tom Young poster. And they gave us 8x10s. So I said, well, there's your poster. What the hell do you want us to do? And they said, well, the director wants it more comic booky. That was the only directive they gave us. And I said, comic booky? And they didn't know. These guys hadn't seen the film because nobody had seen it yet. So they didn't know what it was. I said, well, who the hell's the guy? They're giving us all these shots. This is the trading card set here for Shadows. But who's this guy? I said. And they said, I don't know. It was a man in the iron mask or something. They gave us a bunch of pictures, shots. They said, don't worry about the principals looking like them because nobody knows who they are. Because we didn't have the right headshots of Hamill or, the two Carrie Fisher, geez, remember? They had, you need a headshot with the right lighting to get the structure of the face to keep the likeness and everything. And they had nothing. It was all flat lighting and stuff. So we tried to keep it to look like them, but they said, hurry. So we went home, painted it in 36 hours, literally came up with our drawing, our layout. Again, I reposed the figures real fast with Polaroid shots to get the stronger lighting that we wanted. And we figured on the train, we were trying to analyze what the hell they meant by more comic booky. And we figured, well, higher contrast in regards to values, light to dark, and color. That warm against cool, warm light, cool light, blues and all that big contrast. So that's what we did. And I figured, well, maybe jazz up the figure of the girl a little bit, make her a little more Frazetta-ish, Frank Frazetta-ish. But that again, we brought the painting in, that was that. And they then took the painting and shot it, and we went home. And the next day they called and said, well, because I had suggested to them, well, you need somebody in the corner because we didn't put the robots in yet. They weren't in the picture. And they said, how about some figures in the background here in the distance, this big hairy guy, whoever he is. And they said, oh, no, they called Lucas apparently. They kept going around a corner and it never tells who they were talking to back then. I didn't meet anybody, And they said, well, no, he said, put the robots and the droids in. So I said, fine. So we drew them on the spot in their studio in New York. They went out and got the paint that I needed to paint them. I told them to paint them, and they painted it in the studio. And then he said, by the way, he wants you to make your names bigger. Normally, because we always signed when Tim and I worked together, we just signed Hildebrand. And we signed it very tiny in a corner. And we had a reputation now for Star Wars, for the Lord of the Rings. And I didn't find it out till later that George Lucas wanted to cash in on that name, just in case, use everything you can because this movie might not make it. Everybody was passed on it, remember? They all said no to it until Alan Ladd Jr. And so we made our name bigger. Normally, on movie posters like that, who the hell gives a damn? Take your name off. We're not hyping the artist, we're hyping the film, But it was just the opposite. So the film comes out, and I mean, you guys don't remember it, do you? How old were you, Greg?
I am 50, so I was about 7 or 8 when the movie came out.
Yeah. It was like a BC and AD. The world went freaking nuts. It exploded like you can't believe. And Tim and I were swept into this mad rush. We were literally, and I kept saying, it's a post-production. It took 36 hours. It's a poster. We had nothing to do with the movie. Please. No. People magazine, Us magazine, are rushing. We're posing in costumes and they're taking pictures of us and everything. And I'm thinking, this is like freaking insane. Excuse my English. It was like totally crazy. Because, I mean, we spent 36 hours painting it, So that's, I mean, look, it was a fantastic experience. It's incredible. It's like all of a sudden there's this wave comes through and it was that's the story of how we got it.
This podcast is not affiliated in any way with Topps, Disney, or Star Wars, nor is it endorsed by Disney or Lucasfilm, and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All names and sounds and any other related items are properties of their respective trademarks and or copyright holders here in the U.S. and abroad. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com.
That's it.